Hello, everybody. My name is Cesar Pereira. I'm the chair of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators Brazil Branch, and we are very happy to have here on Arbitration Channel, due to the generosity of our friend Lauro Parenti and all his team, Federico Ast, who is one of the big stars in the technology and dispute resolution world right now. And Federico will be in Rio de Janeiro on March the 17th. We will talk about that later for an in-person event regarding these very interesting topics. And he was very generous to be available to talk with us today about some of these issues, about some of the things that we will be discussing in Rio in person in about 10 days. Federico will be interviewed here in this opportunity by André Guskow Cardoso. And so before we move on, I'd like to introduce to you both our speaker and our interviewer. Federico Ast is graduated in economics and philosophy at the University of Buenos Aires. He has a PhD in management from the IAE Business School. He is the founder and CEO of Kleros, which is very well known to anybody who has any interest in this topic of technology and dispute resolution. Kleros is a legal tech company that uses game theory and blockchain technology in arbitration. He is a pioneer in the field of decentralized justice. He has lectured in universities such as Stanford, Oxford, and Columbia. He's an alum at Singularity University and hosts the first Coursera courses about blockchain and legal tech in Spanish. But he will be speaking English here with us. He's passionate about exponential technologies such as artificial intelligence, crowdsourcing, and blockchain for social innovation, which is, as you see, a very broad and comprehensive background to bring here to this discussion we will have today. As I said, he will be interviewed by André Guskow Cardoso, who has a master's from the Federal University of Paraná in Brazil. Yeah, he's a partner at Justin Pereira Oliveira e Talamini. He's a member of the Innovation and Governance Commission of the Brazilian Bar Association in the state of Paraná, and a member of Arbitech. He is one of the Brazilian main specialists in this field of dispute resolution and technology. So before turning the floor to our speakers, I would like to just thank CBMA in Arbitration Channel for the partnership with the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators in bringing Federico Ast here and in creating this opportunity for us to hear him directly. Before we close, I will come back to you with more information about the event we will have in Rio in 10 days, but I don't want to take any more of our speakers' time. So please, André, the floor is yours to interview Federico. Thank you, Federico.
Thank you, Cesar. And without any time, we as Cesar mentioned, Federico is one of the great specialists in ODRs and technology and the use of blockchain in dispute resolution. And he could speak, he could explain some important topics today for the audience, and all these themes will be discussed also in the event in March 17, as Cesar has mentioned. And Federico, as starting now, as an introduction to our discussion, could you make a brief explanation of the functioning of Kleros platform?
Yeah, sure. First, let me thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. I'm looking forward to being in Rio on the 17th. We will discuss Kleros, and we will discuss more generally what is going to look like, solving disputes in a world of the metaverse. So, so let me tell you a bit about Kleros. So, we have a world economy that has been globalizing and becoming more digital over the last 20 years. I mean, since the internet became commercially massive in the 90s and a bit later. And then we started having lots of different disputes happening in this new online economy. Like, for example, let's say I hire you, André, for doing, a video for me, for my blockchain project. And then I have a dispute because you don't comply with my expectations on the product that I expected you to deliver. I'm not going to go to, of course, court in Brazil to sue you, right? And of course, I'm not going to go to arbitration in Paris in order to, take back my $500 from you. So we have, in this world economy, we start to have a number of new type of disputes which we didn't have before when arbitration was invented, because now these disputes are like kind of low value disputes and between jurisdictions, right? And this is one of the main topics that are starting to happen in the world of the internet. And so how can Kleros help? So let's imagine that when we make the agreement when I hire you for doing this video for me, I put the money to pay you into a escrow account done by blockchain, and we both agree that if there is a dispute in our contract, there's going to be an arbitrator called Kleros, right? So this is not very different to what happens in the traditional world. You have two parties that make a contract, and then there is an arbitration clause that says what's happening in case there is a dispute. Difference is that this clause is going to be written into a smart contract, into the code of our agreement. So if a dispute happens, then the case is going to go to Kleros, and the money that I put into this escrow smart contract is going to be locked there until the case finishes. And then Kleros is going to select a number of jurors who are going to analyze the case. They're going to see the contract, see the product, and then, based on some rules, they're going to make a decision on who is right. So if I am voted right, so the money that is into the smart contract comes back to me. If you are voted right, then you get the money, and this solves the case, right? So a very important thing here is how these jurors are selected. This is made by crowdsourcing. Any a person who wants to be a juror in this case can be. They have to have a token, cryptographic asset called PNK, which is a Kleros token, and if they deposit this token into a court in Kleros, they can be drawn as juror randomly among all of the others who will also made this deposit. So in this way, Kleros can be a solution to a big number of disputes in the world that's coming. I just mentioned the case of the video, but imagine disputes regarding crypto assets, disputes regarding NFTs, and disputes regarding the metaverse, that is the place where we are going to spend the rest of our lives.
Yeah, thank you. And why use blockchain? What's the idea behind the use of blockchain technology to enhance dispute resolution systems? What are the advantages and the disadvantages in using blockchain for this kind of dispute resolution, Federico?
So blockchain has a very important, feature which we didn't have in the previous era of the internet. It's a network of computers that share a same ledger. They can reach a consensus on how many assets are into different accounts. They can reach a consensus in how should a process be done. And everyone that is part of this blockchain, or everyone, can basically see that no one has tampered with the rules. So in the world of law, we typically had this very important concept of due process, right? And the idea that when there is a dispute, it should be dealt with exactly following what the law says, right? So we, in the traditional world, we want to make sure that the judge is not a friend of one of the parties, or that no one can put the judge that is his friend, or that no one can tamper with the evidence. So blockchain can bring this same transparency into the digital world. So when you make a process on blockchain, everyone can be sure that the process is going to be done exactly as was written in the code, and that nobody can tamper with the evidence, and that nobody can change or tamper with the jury selection. So, and when I say nobody, I mean really nobody, because I am founder and CEO at Kleros, and not even me. I cannot change the way in which jurors are selected. I mean, I don't have any special rights. I don't have any special access to the console or anything. So, I mean, exactly how the process was meant to work, it's going to work. And why it is important? Because it gives parties the trust that if they use Kleros as an arbitration seat or procedure, everything is going to be done exactly as was agreed, and that no one can like corrupt the system. So this transparency is guaranteed by the fact that it's built on blockchain technology.
Perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. And you have mentioned the due process, the procedure laws and regulation, and dispute resolution methods have traditionally anchored their legitimacy on principles of due process, the search for truth, and fairness. The downside of all of this is time. Technology brings about new needs and urgencies. Platforms like Kleros seem to operate under different premises. Are we entering? What do you think, Federico? Are we entering a pragmatic post due process era in dispute resolution, or will things fell back to traditional revised tracks with technology and simply providing new tools to reach old goals, old objectives? What do you think?
So that's a really good question. If you see, so ODR is not new. I mean, ODR has been around since the 90s. So when we started having the internet, people started thinking on how we could use the internet for solving disputes, right? So this is not really new. It's from the late 90s. But the important thing is that most of the ODR systems that were created, they looked a bit like a trial on Zoom. You have an arbitrator or a judge, and then you have some parties, and it's kind of everything works more or less as in the traditional world, but done over Zoom. So that's not really innovative. I mean, it's, of course, it's better, it's cheaper, it's more efficient to do a Zoom communication trial than going to a court and having to travel and all that, right? But it kind of doesn't change the logic under which the process is done. So this of course is 20-30% more efficient, and it's, of course, it's better. But now in the recent years we started having two main technologies that are potentially transforming the way in which disputes are going to be solved in the future. First one is machine learning. We kind of have this way to automate a lot of the disputes that we have in the everyday world. And this is something that already works. I mean, this is how many credit card companies, deal with, chargebacks or claims by customers, or also, e-commerce companies. They have like chatbots that deal with make decisions on how to resolve some cases. So that is one big innovation. And then we have another big innovation, this blockchain. So blockchain has this ability to produce networks where many people can participate under a same set of incentives. And blockchain enables what we know as decentralized justice. That is like what Kleros does. So Kleros has a very specific way of providing incentives to jurors in cases that rewards them when they vote. When each juror votes like the majority, he gets a reward. If he votes different, then he is penalized. Of course, it is a very different way of structuring a process of resolution than what we are used to. So what will happen, I think, and this is our hypothesis at Kleros about the evolution of the future of justice, that we are going to have like a line with different types of cases and different ways of solving them. For like more simple, objective and straightforward, like repetitive cases, this is going to be probably solved, by AI, some fully automated method, because it's more efficient to do it that way. I mean, if you can do like machine learning automation and it works because it gives the right results, so go for it. You should like just use that because it's more efficient, right? So that's the first thing. But then you have cases that are more complex, in particular because they involve, interpretation of situations. They involve understanding some of the context under which maybe an agreement was made, and that is very hard to just, solve by automation, because machines are very like poor, and when they have to interpret, intentions of people, they don't make a good job when they have to analyze sarcasm, for example. So there is a number of situations that cannot simply be solved by a fully automated method. And this is where methods like Kleros that are based on humans, but under very specific incentives, will have their main, impact. And then there's going to still be other like disputes that are going to require like more sophisticated legal analysis, legal reasoning. They're going to need, because they have like multiple parties, because they have like different legal situations happening, because they potentially could have political ramifications. So these types of situations are not going to be solved neither by machine learning, neither by Kleros. This is going to go to traditional methods of resolution. But of course, these methods are going to be probably done online, as this is more efficient. So, but the process of resolution is going to still be, I think, quite similar to what we know now, especially after the age of COVID and moving the courts online, which happened much faster than what anyone anticipated a couple of years ago.
Yeah, the pandemic was a catalyst for a lot of transformation all over the institutions, all over the countries, in all countries. And you mentioned the human factor, and anyone can be a juror in the Kleros system.
Anyone can be a juror. You only need to buy the token, that the Kleros token called PNK, and that token is like a lottery ticket that gives you the right to be drawn as a juror in cases in Kleros. So Kleros has like different courts. So some of them are for e-commerce, others for insurance, others for etc. Videos or whatever. So you buy the token and then you deposit the token into the court where you want to work, and then of all the people who deposited their token into that court, then some of them are drawn as jurors. So some 3, 5, 7, that depends on the type of case. And then those people have the right to vote. And this is, a very, disturbing piece of news for lawyers. What do you mean that anyone can be a juror? What do you mean that people may? So aren't these people lawyers? What is there? Well, the thing is that lots of the disputes that have to be solved into the metaverse world we have today, they are not really, legal disputes. Most of them, or not most, but many of them at least, are about, some, the video dispute, or, some other, cases regarding NFTs. Sometimes, if someone plagiarized an NFT or a piece of work that you did and then sold it online, well, I mean, many of these disputes don't need lawyers because they are not at the essence legal disputes. Some of them are like disputes that happen into field of work, and they should be solved by other people who actually work on this type of situations. It kind of comes from very old principles in the world of arbitration. The law merchant, lex mercatoria, which is this is the great grandparent of arbitration as we know it today, was very much based on the peers as the jurors for disputes. If you were a merchant in the Middle Ages and you had a dispute with someone, you definitely didn't want to go to a state court, or let alone to a priest, to have your dispute solved. You went to one of these merchant courts where other merchants made a decision, and they knew what was going on because they basically worked on that every day. So the main thing about Kleros is that it enables anyone to be a juror because it has a very strong set of incentives, and it's based on the idea that peers, they are much better to resolve some kinds of disputes than lawyers or experts in arbitration, right? So that's the key insight about Kleros that makes lawyers a bit uncomfortable. But as we always say, Kleros is not here to replace lawyers. It's more to address a number of cases where lawyers simply are not good enough because they have to deal with jurisdictional issues, or this is low value, and they are not going to spend time to resolve a claim for a couple $1,000. So don't worry, you're not going to get out of a job by Kleros. Maybe by machine learning, but not by Kleros.
Not by Kleros, absolutely. And what one relevant aspect of dispute resolution is always related to contractual disputes. Blockchain technology has ensured the development and expansion of smart contracts. How do you see the role of ODR systems as Kleros in relation to smart contracts?
Yeah. So smart contracts are a concept that is actually older than the blockchain. So smart contracts come from the 90s. And there was this expert in cryptography and legal studies called Nick Szabo. And in the 1990s, he writes a paper called Digital Free Markets. In that paper, he makes a very interesting observation that says something like the following. We're going to the world of e-commerce, of digital real time, and still our technology to make agreements, the human technology to make contracts, still is based on notions and ideas from the 15th century. Paper contracts are based on the ideas that Gutenberg had when he invented the printing press. So what Nick Szabo argues is that we need, in order for the internet commerce to grow and to become massive, we need a new method for solving disputes and a new method for making agreements that is going to be more adapted to the internet age. And this new agreement method or technology, he calls it smart contract. And the important thing of smart contracts is that this is digital agreement that you can make with someone else, and then when there is a claim there, the smart contract is going to self-enforce exactly as is programmed, and no one can tamper with that. And so in the case that we mentioned before, when I was hiring you for a video, Andre, so everything was a smart. I mean, this escrow that we use for me to make the deposit was a smart contract. So you could see that in case you made your job correctly, you would be paid, right? And because you could see that in the code. And I could see that in the code that if I didn't like your job, I could go to Kleros for. So everything that is on the back end of all this system are smart contracts under the idea of Nick Szabo. You know, it's a code that is going to be executed as it's programmed. And so this idea of smart contract was like an abstract idea of the future of contracting for a long time, until in 2014 we had this genius of computer science called Vitalik Buterin, who leads the development of this new blockchain called Ethereum. And in this blockchain, it's similar to the blockchain of the Bitcoin in the sense that it's also a network of computer that process transactions, but also it has an advantage that the language, the coding language, is more sophisticated, and it enables the possibility to make smart contracts. So anything that you could put into the structure of if X then Y, in principle you can put this into a smart contract. Like if the airplane comes or takes off like with a delay of more than 20 minutes, then the passenger will receive a reimbursement of the ticket, of the 20% of the ticket, right? So this has the potential of transforming, you know, a lot of activities forever, because this passenger doesn't have to go to the customer service. He doesn't have to go to a lawyer, to the judge, to anything. When it happens that the plane is delayed by more than was agreed, so he automatically receives the payment. So this is a contract that has the enforcement inside of the contract. So imagine how it can make more efficient a lot of processes in the, legal world, which now require lawyers and notaries and judges and lots of different stuff. So this is why the idea of smart contracts is so powerful. And one more thing, they work internationally. So the smart contract doesn't care if you are in Brazil, in Argentina, or in Switzerland. For the smart contract, it's just the same jurisdiction. So this, in the coming years, I think it's called to transform lots of legal processes in ways beyond recognition.
Thank you. And going straight,
can I ask a question here very quickly? Yes. Federico, on that last point that you made, you had discussed before that Kleros has a distinct human factor involved. And does it make sense for parties to include as part of their smart contract a Kleros stage in the middle, so that instead of relying only on the execution of the code in a smart contract, there could be a stage in the middle where that decision will be made by a human, by a Kleros panel, for instance, and then the rest of the smart contract would kick in. Does that make sense, or just defeats the purpose of a smart contract?
That's actually a very good question.
Also, it's like using Kleros as a kind of oracle, or not. What do you think, Federico?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the point. So smart contracts are very smart in the sense that they can self-execute as they are programmed. But there are situations where there is interpretation. I mean, there is subjectivity. The agreement I had with André about the video. So, I mean, there's not only one way to do a video for promotion. So the contract we signed had different ways of doing it. So, but how does a smart contract recognize if the video that André sent me was or wasn't at the expected quality? This is really hard to do, and you have lots of different situations where simply smart contracts, which are basically a programming logic that was if X then Y then Z then where they cannot really solve because they don't understand what's going on. So at some point you might have disputes regarding human interpretation. So, or we can also go back to the idea of the airplane that was delayed. So yeah, the smart contract can understand that the airplane was left 20 minutes delayed. So if the plane leaves 20 minutes delayed, then pay passenger. But what if the airline claims that there was a force majeure situation? What if there was some situation where like leaving at the exact time on time would have put the passengers in danger because of some storm or anything, So how do you make the smart contract evaluate those situations? So, well, this is exactly why you need an oracle or a subjective oracle, as we sometimes call Kleros. It's a way to address a number of situations that just cannot be dealt with by pure computer code. I could go, forever, like giving you more examples of use cases, but I will leave it here. If you want me to continue, I can give you more. But that's the thing. The transactions between humans are going to have like a number of situations that only humans can understand. And that's why you need tools like Kleros or other, subjective oracles that can solve these situations.
Perfect, Federico. And now going straight to the topic of next week's event, the idea of metaverse has been on media recently. We see this idea everywhere, even though it's not very clear or defined. We don't have a very clear objective concept of metaverse. ODR systems as Kleros will be the justice of metaverse. Could you comment on this, please?
Yeah. So yeah, the metaverse. It's kind of for now a bit of an abstract idea, mostly coming from the world of science fiction. You have for example, the Matrix and other, Snow Crash and other Ready Player One and movies and books that seem to have this same idea that there is like two separate, realities. You have one reality is the, flesh and the mid space that is our everyday life. That we are humans with a biological, existence and all that. And then there is another reality in which we live that is a digital reality. It's a different world where we participate. And the idea of this, science fiction is that this is a very immersive world. A virtual reality, right? So we typically imagine this in the context of VR, but when we use social media app, we kind of are in a metaverse. Maybe the screen is smaller, or we are like not in the idea of immersion within this world, but kind of we are still interacting with other persons in a world that is based on rules that are not the traditional nation, state, or government rules. No, when you are on Facebook, you are a citizen, or more like a subject of a governance structure that makes its own rules and has a system of enforcement for those rules. Like if you break Twitter or Facebook rules, then there are some judges called moderators that can decide to kick you out of that system. As the ancient Greek, ostracized people that they didn't like. They just kick you out of the city. Well, now you can be kicked out of Facebook or Twitter, and that it's quite a big deal, because you might be deriving most of your revenue or income from the following in social media, and if they kick you out of there, then you just lost your revenue, right? And the decision about these situations are done like in a black box. So do you know how Facebook or Twitter make the decision of banning someone? No, they can maybe give you the rules, but you don't have anywhere to really appeal. So when you start thinking about the topic from this angle, then you start seeing that these big tech companies have become the equivalent of virtual states. So that are like monarchies, because they can make the rules, they can enforce the rules, and then you don't have much to complain. Not very different to what Louis XIV did when he was ruling France. I mean, he made the rules, he appointed the judges, and that. So that's when the idea came that we started needing more democratic ways to govern these big internet platforms. And all of this idea of Web3 is transforming these big tech companies or these big tech platforms into more democratic governments, or more like cooperatives, where users make the rules, users can participate in resolving disputes. And if you see the idea of Kleros more from the perspective of us spending more time in the metaverse and us requiring better governance tools for metaverse organizations, then it makes a lot more sense, because how do you expect national courts or traditional arbitration to resolve cases where, first, this is by nature international. You don't even know where people are in these platforms. The idea of national jurisdiction is meaningless. And also, you have another complexity that is unthinkable for traditional systems, that you don't know who people are. People who interact in metaverses are anonymous. You know the avatar, but you don't know who they actually are into the real world. So how do you actually enforce, or how do you even start a legal proceeding against someone that is just a bit into the metaverse, right? And so this is so different to what we are used to in the traditional world, that it's likely to be impossible that traditional methods will resolve the very vast array of claims that are going to start emerging as we spend more and more time in the metaverse world. So what is likely to happen, in my view, is that we are going to have a division of jurisdictions. So traditional courts and traditional arbitration is still going to work for the the local kind of situations, local, of course, the criminal law is not going to change. Then we are going to have the traditional commercial disputes for big amounts of money are still going to be handled by ICC methods, if you want. But then we are going to have another world, another reality, another jurisdiction that is going to be the metaverse, or the metaverses, because different metaverses can have different rules. And in that world, yes, we're going to have Kleros or other methods for resolution, right? I was saying this like 6 years ago in an interview on TV. I was saying that we would need a method for resolving disputes on the metaverse. The guy who was interviewing me thought I was completely crazy, but no, over time, we kind of are now seeing this reality coming to us, and a very big validation of this came from Facebook. Facebook first did Supreme Court to resolve content moderation cases, which is like a governance mechanism that they want to be neutral. And then, well, the idea that they are changing their name to Meta, well, that says everything. This is the world of the future, and as such, we will need adequate governance structures to govern this world of the future.
Absolutely. At least systems that use mechanics similar to Kleros mechanics of dispute resolution. And thank you, Federico. It was a very good teaser for next week's event, and that will deal especially with the metaverse and justice. And I transferred the floor. I call Cesar to have the floor and make all the explanations on the event of next week. Thank you very much, Federico, for your insights and your ideas. That will be further explained and discussed in Rio next week. Thank you.
Looking forward.
Thank you, André.
For me. See you next week.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Federico and André. And as André put it, this has been really a wonderful teaser. And I'd like to highlight to everybody that's watching us now that here you can find on the comments on this platform some of the information on how to register for the March 17th event. What we will do on March 17th is actually much larger than what we were able to do here. The event will start at 9:30 and it will end at 1 p.m. It will start at 9:30 a.m. and will end at 1 p.m. So we will have much longer to discuss all these issues. And you will find here on the comments both the Eventbrite link for you to register for in-person attendance, as well as the information about how to watch it on live streaming in case you cannot be in Rio next week for this event. So again, Federico, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you, Lauro, and all your team from Arbitration Channel for having us here. Thank you, André, for your excellent interview. And I hope to see many of you next week in person in Rio or online on Arbitration Channel again. Thank you, and have a good evening or have a good rest of the day, depending on where you are. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.